My name is Emily Anderson, and at 30, I found myself driving down a familiar, dusty road toward my childhood home in rural Ohio. 6 years had gone by since I left, and I had never anticipated returning under these conditions. I had left for college with the goal of conquering the business world, but life had other plans. After years of struggle, I made the life-changing decision to leave the corporate world and join the Navy. I neatly tucked my rank badge into my luggage, keeping it out of sight. As I got closer to the house, memories began to come back in, like a fast-forward movie. The familiar aroma of pine trees and the earthy perfume of the countryside permeated my automobile. The curving road up to the house appeared unchanged, with tall grass bending in the breeze and an ancient white fence creaking in the wind. But I knew the house itself was another thing. Despite its familiarity, it had always been a place of judgment, a place that never understood my decisions. I drove onto the gravel driveway, my palms slightly sweaty against the steering wheel. I parked, took a big breath, and got out of the car. My boots crunched on the gravel as I approached the door, my heart hammering. The house, with its peeling paint and rusting mailbox, felt both familiar and confining. I stepped up the steps and rang the doorbell, which rang sharply in the early afternoon silence. The door opened, and there she was, my mother, Janet. She stood there in her apron, her gaze briefly meeting mine before moving away. "Emily, you made it," she murmured, her voice bland and lacking the warmth I longed for. She didn't even come to hug me. Instead, she motioned for me to enter. The aroma of something baking persisted in the air, but it did little to alleviate the strain. "Come in. Dinner's almost ready," she said, her tone betraying her underlying dissatisfaction. The thick, velvety carpet, which had witnessed better days, muffled my footsteps as I walked inside. The house looked exactly as I remembered, as if it had been preserved in time. Faded family portraits lined the hallway, their edges curling with age, and the aged furniture in the living room still smelled like my childhood. Nothing was more obvious than the implicit judgment in the air. My family had never quite supported my decision to join the Navy. They saw it as a waste of my talent, a step backward in life. They had always wanted something better for me, something more prestigious. Instead, I chose a life in uniform. I placed my bag on the little mahogany table at the door and moved around the house, sliding my fingers along familiar surfaces, the polished wood of the staircase railing, the ancient bookshelf filled with forgotten titles. Everything was the same, except for me. I wasn't the girl who left for college with giant ambitions of a corporate career. I was a different person now. My father, Thomas, had spent decades as a top executive at Pinnacle Enterprises, a major technology business. He was the type of man who prized accomplishment above all else, and from a young age, he made it obvious that his definition of success did not include the military. He had always taken great pride and pleasure in the company, and he expected me to advance within it. But I disappointed him when I decided to apply to the Navy rather than pursue the business degree he had envisioned for me. As I walked into the kitchen, I heard my mother's voice again, this time warmer as she spoke of my brother, David. She announced, "David will be here soon. He's looking for a major promotion, you know. Senior Vice President is an important position at Pinnacle. You should feel proud of him. You know, he's always performed well for the organization." Despite my inner turmoil, I nodded. I wasn't ashamed of David. I constantly used his achievements and career to criticize my own. David, with his immaculate outfits and polished shoes, was the golden kid. He adhered to the path my father had outlined for him. I felt like an outsider within my family. I had tried to smile, but it felt hollow. "That's great," I replied, although the words felt strange and scripted. I did not mean it. I was trying so hard to keep it together, to retain the sliver of dignity I had left. I excused myself, leaving the kitchen to go upstairs to my old room. As I walked up the stairs, the usual creaking of the steps seemed louder than before. The wallpaper, worn and peeling at the edges, was exactly as it had been when I was a teenager. I reached the top of the stairs and entered my room. There it was, the room I'd spent so many hours in and many nights dreaming of something bigger than this. The cheerleading trophies from high school, academic accolades, and college acceptance letters remained on the walls, locked in time. But there was nothing concerning my Navy career. I have no photos from my commissioning ceremony, no medals, no newspaper clippings about my deployments or promotions. To my family, none of this mattered. In their opinion, I had wasted my ability. I sat on my childhood bed, brushing my hand over the quilt, which still smelled slightly like lavender. It was comforting, but it also felt like a burden, like it was keeping me back. I remembered the night I told my parents of my desire to join the Navy. My father's reaction when I told him I had gotten the ROTC scholarship was one of disappointment and incredulity. "You could have had anything you wanted, Emily," my father replied, his tone cold. "You are too smart for this. The military serves those who have no other options. You're better than that."
The following morning, everything seemed odd. The house was silent, the kind of silence that comes only when everyone is holding their breath. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with anticipation of what was to follow. I could hear my folks downstairs, going about their daily lives. My pulse raced at the notion of facing them in my uniform. But I told myself that today was about me, not them. I stood up, took a big breath, and opened the luggage I'd packed the night before. My military dress outfit was folded nicely inside and properly hidden. Even in the low light of morning, the clean midnight blue silk shone. I stroked the silver eagle emblem on the collar, its weight heavy from the years of sacrifice, training, and advancements that had brought me here. The insignia, the symbol of a full colonel, would henceforth be worn where it belonged, on my shoulders. I paused for a time, looking in the mirror. I had always known that I was different from my family. While they had taken the predictable path to corporate success, I had chosen the military, carving out a career in defense and cybersecurity. That was tough, unorthodox, and in many ways, considerably more satisfying. But for years, I had hidden my accomplishments from them, partly because I knew they wouldn't understand, but largely because I no longer needed their approval. Today, things would be different. The uniform felt both unfamiliar and familiar, as if it had been waiting for me all along. I ran my fingertips over the brass buttons, the precise folds of the fabric, and the neatly placed ribbons, each marking a step in my journey that they would never understand. I dressed deliberately, savoring the ritual, telling myself that the process wasn't about proving anything to them, but about accepting who I had become. By the time I finished, I could hear my folks getting ready to depart for the event downstairs. I adjusted the collar one last time to ensure that every detail was in place. As I proceeded to approach the door, my pulse racing in my chest, I heard the gentle click of my boots on the floor. I could hear my father's speech through the thin walls, his strong tone carrying with it his usual pride in David. They were discussing the next work celebration, when David would most likely be promoted once more and where my parents would shower him with praise. It was the same script I had grown up with, the same script that had made me feel insignificant, eclipsed by my brother's endless success. But today, I wouldn't be invisible. I walked downstairs, my boots clicking forcefully against the hardwood. My father paused in mid-sentence when I entered the living room. His eyes glanced over me in surprise, perplexity dawning on his features. My mother slowly turned around, her face unreadable. It was the first time I'd ever seen them both at a loss for words. David, who was sitting comfortably on the couch with a cup of coffee, froze as well.
His eyes widened as they fixed on the silver eagle symbol on my collar. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. The silence in the room was oppressive and suffocating as I stood there, my stance straight and my gaze fixed. "Good morning, Dad," I responded quietly and steadily. "I am here for the company event. I'll be joining you today." My mother blinked, her complexion pallid. I didn't realize you were attending," she continued, her voice trembling. "What is this all about, Emily?" I felt the weight of their confusion, but I stood firm. Questions were unavoidable, and judgments were incessant. That did not surprise me. After all, they'd never taken my profession seriously. Today, however, they would be forced to see me for who I truly was. I didn't allow them time to react before speaking again. "I am the military liaison for Pinnacle's $1.2 billion defense contract. My responsibilities include supervising all technical components and ensuring the project's security. I'll be attending the event today as part of my responsibilities." David's mouth opened again, but nothing came out. My father simply stared at me, his face frozen with disbelief. It was the first time they'd ever heard me discuss my career in such a simple, professional manner. For years, I had been the target of their disparaging remarks, the girl who had squandered her potential. But here, in this outfit, I stood before them as a figure they couldn't ignore. The tension in the room was palpable, but I refused to budge. "I'll be leaving in a few minutes," I informed my father. "Let me know when you're ready." Without waiting for a response, I turned and started toward the door, my boots clicking louder than ever. I could hear my father's voice behind me, a mix of disbelief and something else I couldn't place. But I didn't turn back. I had said enough. Today, I was no longer Emily Anderson, the daughter they had written off. Today, I was Colonel Emily Anderson, and my goal was to establish my worth to me, not to others.
As I drove near Pinnacle Enterprises, the headquarters looming ahead, I couldn't shake the sense of suspense. The path was familiar, but now it felt different. There was more weight on it than the normal tension of family expectations. Today, I was not merely attending a corporate function. I was entering a venue that would fully showcase my value. Not just my family, but everyone in the room would witness my value. I never pictured myself on this stage, but here I was, in full uniform, with years of hard work and sacrifice behind me. When I arrived at the entrance, the security guard recognized me immediately. He straightened up straighter when he noticed the silver eagle symbol on my suit. "Good morning, Colonel," he murmured, his tone courteous. I nodded curtly and handed him my ID, feeling a sense of pride. My pride was genuine. It was who I had become. The man at the gate knew nothing about me apart from my rank, but that didn't matter at the time. I wasn't Emily Anderson, the failing daughter. I was Colonel Anderson, and that status required respect. I went through the security checkpoint and made my way inside, the hallways filled with the hum of personnel getting ready for the day. The mood was strained, but also filled with expectation. Today was an important day for Pinnacle. Shannon Murphy, the CEO, came here for a project review, and my presence was important to the event. As I stepped toward the conference room, I felt the gaze on me. There was a subtle change in the air, a new energy that enveloped me now that I was in uniform. My presence was more than just a figure in the backdrop. It was a statement. I was present, and I belonged here. When I got to the meeting room, the door was already open. I took a long breath before pulling it open, my boots clicking against the floor as I entered. Inside, the executives were busy preparing for the meeting, laying out materials and discussing last-minute arrangements. My father and brother were among them, standing by the windows and analyzing the event's presentation. As I entered the room, my father turned, his eyes widening as they met mine. "Emily," he asked, his voice faltering, What are you doing here?" I stood up with my back straight and stared him in the eyes. I'm here for the project review, I said quietly, moving deeper into the room. I didn't wait for his response before addressing the group of executives. I am Colonel Emily Anderson. Today, I'll be monitoring the project's technical components. The room went silent. The executives looked at me in disbelief, and for a brief time, I felt as if I was in the eye of a hurricane. My father's expression softened as he began to comprehend the situation. He had no idea I was the military liaison overseeing the same project his company had been working on for years. Shannon Murphy, the CEO, moved forward with a friendly smile, easing the tension in the room. "Colonel Anderson," she said, holding out her hand, "it's a pleasure to meet you in person. I assumed we were having a video conference today, but I'm delighted you're here." I shook her hand firmly while retaining a professional demeanor. I was in town visiting family and thought this would be a good opportunity to review the project in person. The shock among the executives was apparent. Their gaze shifted between my outfit and my father, and I sensed a shift in the atmosphere. Shannon addressed the assembly, saying, "Colonel Anderson is our Project Aegis liaison. She will be responsible for implementing the new security standards and has final approval authority over all technical requirements." I observed my father's jaw slowly lowering. He stood there, transfixed, obviously trying to digest the truth. This was not the daughter he had been dismissing for so long. This individual was a colonel in the United States Navy, with far more power than he could grasp. As the meeting began, everyone in the room shifted their attention. The executives now looked to me for solutions, treating me with the respect I wished for in my family. All eyes were focused on me when technical questions arose about the integration of the military systems with Pinnacle's current technology. I conducted extensive analysis to ensure that every decision was taken with care and precision. Throughout the discussion, I watched my father and brother exchanging glances, their faces a mix of confusion and skepticism. For the first time, they saw me not as the failure they had always thought I was, but someone with genuine power, someone who had earned every ounce of authority that came with the title of colonel. When it was my brother's turn to present, I could see the stress in his shoulders. David, who had always been so secure in his professional life, trembled somewhat when he talked. His gaze kept migrating to mine, as if unsure how to proceed. He never anticipated his younger sister would be in such a position of influence, especially in a field he was unfamiliar with. "David, please continue," I said calmly and professionally. He cleared his throat, hoping to restore his calm. The room remained silent as he struggled through his presentation. After his presentation concluded, I posed several challenging questions that exposed flaws in his methodology. I wasn't trying to embarrass him. The project had to be perfect, and I wasn't going to let his mistake slip. I saw my father's cheeks flush with embarrassment. For years, he had overlooked me in favor of David's corporate success, but it was now clear who possessed the true skill. My father and brother were discovering firsthand that success encompassed more than just ascending the corporate ladder. As the discussion progressed, the executives grew to appreciate me, and their questioning became more intelligent and attentive. I earned this respect, and it was mine to keep.
The discussion went on for hours, but eventually I felt a sense of success sweep over me. I had precisely provided the project's technical review, authoritatively answered every question, and demonstrated to the executives why I was responsible for the project. The corporate sector now mirrored the respect I earned from my military peers. Shannon Murphy turned to me as the meeting ended, her smile genuine and admiring. "Colonel Anderson," she continued in a friendly tone, "your presence today has certainly enhanced this debate. I am excited to see what else we can do together on this project." I nodded, the weight of pride on my shoulders. My work, reputation, and years of proving myself had all come together at this one moment. I was no longer just Emily, the underappreciated daughter. I had become Colonel Emily Anderson, a woman who had advanced through the ranks based solely on her own abilities, without the support or acknowledgement of my family.
But even as I stood there, basking in the glory of my professional accomplishment, I knew the most difficult part was still to come. My family had no idea what had just happened in that conference room. They had no idea how much power I now wielded over Pinnacle's destiny and the fate of the defense contract they had fought so hard for. As the room cleared, I saw my father and brother standing at the door, observing me from across the room. My father's expression was unreadable, with his typical assurance replaced by something more fragile. Gregory, too, appeared disoriented, his arrogance replaced by a calm unease. I took a deep breath and approached them, my boots clicking against the slick floor. The sound was like a rhythm reverberating around the room, as if every step I made brought me closer to the confrontation I had avoided for so long. "Emily," my father said, his voice tense, "we need to talk." I maintained an unshakable posture as I looked him in the eyes. "We can talk, but I think you owe me some answers first." My father appeared to falter, his typically forceful demeanor fading. "I never knew," he admitted slowly, his voice tinged with remorse. "I never knew you had gotten so far in your career." I nodded, not expressing sympathy. "Dad, you never asked. You never bothered to ask." Gregory shuffled awkwardly, his former confidence gone. "Emily, I stopped him by raising my hand. Save it," I answered calmly but firmly. "You spent years criticizing my choices, making me feel inadequate. And today, I demonstrated who I am. That is how I've always been." The words lingered, heavy with the weight of reality. My father and brother had built their careers on a system that valued conformity and required the same predictable path. But I had chosen a different path, a more difficult one, admittedly, but one that had given me strength and skills they would never understand. Gregory said, "I'm proud of you, Emily," in a lower voice than I had ever heard him. "I did not comprehend. I had no idea what you had been doing. I apologize for how I treated you." His sincerity struck me as unexpected. This wasn't the brother who had insulted my career decision and told me I was squandering my talents. The shift in him was tangible, indicating that the world had shifted for both of us. My father also looked at me differently today. He cleared his throat and moved closer, his gaze softening in a way I'd never seen before. I didn't understand," he said. "I assumed you were simply wasting your time in the military. I know now that I was mistaken. You've earned everything you've accomplished." The weight of his words landed on me, but I couldn't help but feel a tinge of disappointment. For years, I sought their approval, hoping that one day they would understand the value in my decisions. But now, after all, I recognized that their acknowledgement, while significant, was not the win I had hoped for. The true achievement had been proving to myself that I did not need their approval to recognize my worth. "Thank you," I replied, simply, addressing his gaze. "It's good to hear that, but it's been a long time coming." As the room dispersed, the tension gradually dissipated. For the first time in years, we shared a glimmer of understanding. My father and brother had finally recognized who I was, who I had become. That moment was painful, but it also marked a new chapter in my life, in which I no longer had to fight for a place in their world. I walked out of the meeting room with my head held high, past my father and brother, who now stood with the calm respect I had always sought. But I didn't linger. I had finished what I had come to do. I had demonstrated the lady I had become. I had triumphed, not for their approval, but for my personal tranquility.
6 months later, the changes in my family were obvious. The healing process was slow, but it had begun. What had formerly been a house of expectations, judgments, and disappointments was now a place for meaningful conversations to take place. My father, who had before dismissed my career, began to show an interest in the job I accomplished. Gregory had come to accept that our paths, while distinct, were valuable. My mother, who had constantly likened me to David or Tiffany, stopped making those subtle comments. She inquired about my work and the specifics of the projects I was handling. For the first time, I felt seen. It wasn't ideal, but it represented development. I had invited my family to dinner in my Washington, D.C. apartment, which I had made my own. The apartment was imbued with my signature military perfection, and the balcony view of the Potomac River was stunning. Although it was not large or luxurious, it was uniquely mine, a stark contrast to my childhood home in a small town. My father arrived first, carrying a framed news piece regarding the successful deployment of Project Aegis and my role in it. He had it properly mounted and prominently exhibited in his workplace. Although it was a small gesture, it conveyed a powerful message. "I thought you might want a copy for your wall," he added, his voice still hesitant, as if unsure how to handle this new dynamic between us. "Thank you for the gift, Dad," I murmured, feeling truly moved. "That means a lot." My mother arrived next, bringing a homemade apple pie, which was my childhood favorite. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like we were building a bridge between ourselves, one crumb at a time. "Your apartment is lovely, Emily," she said, looking around at the minimalist decor. "So neat and organized." "Military precision," I quipped, and to my astonishment, she laughed, not in condemnation, but in understanding. Gregory and Megan arrived last, with an expensive bottle of wine. It was the most unexpected development I'd seen in my brother. He used to be the golden child, the one who served as the benchmark by which I was compared. But now, following the events of the previous months, he was different. His attitude had softened, and he began to perceive me as a colleague, a professional with significant accomplishments, rather than just his sister. As we sat in the living room sipping cocktails, I observed that our chats became more casual. They weren't full of comparisons anymore. My father, who had long considered me a disappointment, was now genuinely interested in my job. He inquired about the most recent breakthroughs in cybersecurity, and I presented some of the technical elements in simple terms. Gregory, who had before criticized my career choice, now expressed admiration. "I implemented those security protocols you suggested last month. The team thought I was a genius for coming up with them." I raised an eyebrow. "Did you give credit where it was due?" He grinned shyly. "Eventually, after enjoying the praise for about 5 minutes. But true recognition was present, and it meant more than any apology could ever be. It was a sign of respect, indicating that he no longer considered me a failed sister, but rather as someone who had earned her place. As dinner was served, the conversation became more fluid. My father, who had always kept his emotions under control, began to talk more about his profession. For the first time, he did not speak about the firm as if it were the only thing that mattered. He inquired about my Navy experiences, including the hardships I faced and the people I met. After years of closure, it felt like a door had opened between us. After dinner, as we gathered around the table with coffee and pie, my father raised his glass. "To Colonel Emily Anderson," he continued, his tone full of pride, "who demonstrated that forging your path may lead to remarkable outcomes. We may have been reluctant to recognize it, but we could not be more proud now." I raised my glass with him, feeling a warm sensation run through me. It wasn't the validation I had hoped for, but it was something better. Appreciation based on understanding rather than obligation. The evening ended with laughter and stories, and as my family prepared to leave, I felt a sense of calm that I had never felt in my childhood home. We still had a long way to go, and old scars would not heal overnight, but we had made progress. After they went, I sat back in my chair and looked around at my flat. It was silent now, but for the first time in years, it felt good. It wasn't accompanied by judgment or unspoken expectations. I had gone a long way from the girl who used to feel invisible in her own home, and while I no longer needed their approval, I was now beginning to acquire something far more valuable: respect. The validation I had previously sought was no longer required. I'd already proven myself. I realized then that the journey was not about proving to my family that I had made the right choice. It was about proving to myself that I had always known my potential. And, at the end of the day, that was the only affirmation that counted.